I've seen this before. Judge Katherine Walsh's voice carried the sharp edge of someone who believed they'd found a liar. She leaned forward on her elevated bench, her reading glasses perched low on her nose, staring down at the defendant with undisguised contempt. Below her stood Raymond Ray Foster, 81 years old, his frame thin but upright. He wore a pressed white shirt, dark slacks, and a navy blue windbreaker. Pinned to his chest were 5 ribbons arranged in 2 neat rows, and beneath them, a single medal, the Distinguished Service Cross, second only to the Medal of Honor. The courtroom was nearly empty on this Tuesday morning. A board clerk, 2 paralegals waiting for their cases, and Ray's court-appointed attorney, a nervous young man named David Park, fresh out of law school. "Miss Foster," Judge Walsh continued, removing her glasses and dangling them like a weapon, "you are before this court for a minor trespassing charge. You were found inside the perimeter of the Old Harbor Naval Facility after hours, a place that has been decommissioned for 20 years. Ray's voice, when he spoke, was quiet and steady. "I was paying my respects, Your Honor." "Paying your respects," the judge repeated, her tone mocking. "With a bolt cutter, security found you cutting through the fence. The gate was locked. I needed to get to the memorial." Judge Walsh's eyes dropped to his chest. "And I suppose you wore your decorations for this midnight trespassing adventure? Or are those part of your usual outfit when you break and enter?" David Park stood quickly. "Your Honor, my client has no prior record. He's 81. This is clearly a misunderstanding." "What I see," the judge interrupted, her voice rising, "is an elderly man trying to use military service, real or imagined, to excuse criminal behavior." She pointed at Ray's chest. "Those ribbons, that medal. How convenient to wear them to court." "Do you think I am stupid, Mr. Foster?" Ray remained silent, his pale green eyes fixed on a point somewhere above the judge's head. "I asked you a question," Walsh snapped. "Did you purchase those at an Army surplus store, or maybe online? I know how this works. Old men looking for sympathy, for special treatment, thinking a chest full of medals will get them out of trouble." "Your Honor," David tried again, his voice shaking, "my client served honorably in Vietnam. His records can be easily fabricated." Walsh cut him off. She stood, her black robes billowing. "Bailiff, remove those items from the defendant. I want them examined." The bailiff, a middle-aged man named Torres, who'd been doing this job for 15 years, hesitated. Something in Ray Foster's bearing, in his absolute stillness, gave him pause. "Now, bailiff," the judge ordered. Torres approached Ray. "Sir, I need you to remove the medals and ribbons." Ray unpinned them slowly, his scarred hands steady. He handed them over with a quiet dignity that somehow made the courtroom feel smaller. Judge Walsh took them, turning the Distinguished Service Cross over in her palm like a piece of evidence at a crime scene. "Impressive," she said sarcastically. "The Distinguished Service Cross. Do you know what this represents, Mr. Foster?" "Yes, ma'am." "Enlighten me." Ray's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Extraordinary heroism in combat." "Exactly." Walsh's smile was cruel. "And what extraordinary heroism did you perform? Breaking into an abandoned building to what? Reminisce?" The medal caught the fluorescent light as she held it up. For just a moment, the sterile courtroom seemed to shift. The flash came unbidden, triggered by the sight of the medal in hostile hands. The courtroom dissolved into jungle heat and chaos. February 19th, a younger Ray Foster, his face smeared with mud and gunpowder residue, crouched behind a crumbling wall in Huế City. His platoon had been cut off for 3 days. 37 men had become 12. The NVA had them surrounded, and ammunition was running critically low. The radio operator beside him was dead, the radio itself destroyed by shrapnel. No communication, no extraction, no hope. Ray could hear Lieutenant Morrison, just 23 years old, barely older than the privates he commanded, trying to keep the remaining men calm. They were holed up in what used to be a school. Now it was just concrete and death. That's when Ray saw them, through a gap in the wall. A medical evacuation team, 3 blocks away, pinned down in a pagoda court. He could see the Red Cross on the helicopter, tilted at an angle, its rotor damaged. Wounded men lay in the open, exposed to enemy fire. Morrison saw it too. "We can't help them, Sergeant. We move, we die." Ray looked at the 12 faces around him. Kids, most of. Then he looked at the medics and wounded in that courtyard. "Cover me," was all he said. What happened next would be documented in after-action reports and witness statements. Staff Sergeant Raymond Foster made 6 trips across open ground under continuous enemy machine gun fire. 6 times, he carried wounded men from that courtyard to the relative safety of a partially collapsed building. On his 5th trip, he took a bullet through his left shoulder. On his 6th, shrapnel from a mortar opened a gash across his back. He didn't stop until every wounded man, 17 in total, was under cover. Then he organized their defense until reinforcements arrived 8 hours later. 3 men died from their wounds that day, but 14 survived because Ray Foster refused to accept that they couldn't be helped. The memory vanished as quickly as it came, leaving Ray standing in the courtroom, watching a judge who'd never heard a shot fired in anger mock the symbol of that day. "Your Honor," David Park was saying, pulling papers from his folder with trembling hands, "I have my client's DD-Tune 14 form right here. His service record clearly shows. Those can be forged." Judge Walsh interrupted. She was enjoying this now, her morning entertainment. "Do you know how many stolen valor cases I've seen? Men pretending to be heroes for attention, for benefits they didn't earn." She pointed the medal at Ray like an accusation. "I'm going to recess for 1 hour. I'm having my clerk run your name through every military database available. And Miss Foster," her voice dropped to a threatening whisper, "if I find out you're lying to this court about your service, this trespassing charge will be the least of your worries. I will see you prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." She slammed her gavel. The crack echoed through the room like a gunshot. David Park guided Ray into a small conference room adjacent to the courtroom. His hands were still shaking as he closed the door. "Mr. Foster, I am so sorry. I've never seen a judge behave like that." He ran his hand through his hair, frustration and helplessness written across his young face. "She's going to destroy you. She's on some kind of crusade." Ray sat down slowly in one of the plastic chairs. He looked tired, the confrontation having drained something from him. "It's all right, son." "It's not all right." David paced the small room. "She's accusing you of stolen valor. That's a federal crime. Even if we prove your service, she could still hold you in contempt for the trespassing. You could go to jail." He flipped through Ray's thin case file desperately, looking for something, anything that could help. Then he saw it. On the intake form under emergency contacts. Name, James Caldwell. Number 703 area code, Virginia. Below it, Ray had written in careful script, "Only call if the ship is sinking." "Mr. Foster," David said, looking up. "This emergency contact, James Caldwell, who is he?" Ray's expression became guarded. "An old friend. The ship is sinking, sir. May I call him?" Ray was quiet for a long moment. "Jim's an important man now. I don't want to bother him with please." David's voice cracked slightly. "Let me try." Ray nodded slowly. David dialed. The phone rang twice before a crisp female voice answered. "Secretary of the Navy's office." David's breath caught. "Secretary of the Navy?" "Yes. Hello, my name is David Park. I'm calling on behalf of Raymond Foster. It's an emergency. The secretary's schedule is fully booked for the next month. If you'd like to submit a written request." "No, please," David interrupted, desperation making him bold. "Mr. Foster is in a courtroom right now. A judge just accused him of stolen valor." She took his Distinguished Service Cross. The silence on the other end was absolute. When the aide spoke again, her voice was completely different. Sharp, focused, urgent. "What did you say the name was?" "Raymond Foster. Ray Foster." "Where are you?" "Exact location. City Courthouse, 1200 Main Street, Courtroom 3. "Foster, leave that room." The line went dead. David stared at his phone, his heart pounding. In a corner office at the Pentagon, the aide burst into an inner chamber without knocking. Secretary of the Navy, James Caldwell, a distinguished man in his late 60s with silver hair and the bearing of someone who'd commanded respect his entire life, looked up from a briefing document. "What is it?" "Sir, there's a situation. Ray Foster is in a court. A judge has accused him of stolen valor and confiscated his DSC." The document in Caldwell's hands fell to his desk. His face went pale, then flushed with barely controlled fury. "Ray Foster, you're certain?" "Yes, sir." Caldwell stood, his chair sliding back. "Get my car. Get me a Marine Honor Guard in dress blues, and get me on the phone with the base commander at Quantico. I want every available officer within 50 miles at that courthouse in 20 minutes. He grabbed his cover. "That judge has no idea what she's done." Back in courtroom 3A, Judge Walsh returned to the bench with a triumphant expression. She held several printed pages. "Bailiff, bring the defendant back in." Ray and David entered and took their places. The judge let the silence stretch, savoring the moment. "Well, Mr. Foster," she began, her voice dripping with vindication. "I've had my clerk search the public military personnel databases. And what do you think we found?" She held up the papers. A Raymond Foster who served in Vietnam, enlisted 1966, honorably discharged 1970. Standard infantry service. She paused dramatically. But no record whatsoever of a Distinguished Service Cross. No Purple Hearts, just basic service ribbons. David shot to his feet. "Your Honor, many Vietnam-era records are classified or incomplete. The National Personnel Records Center fire in 1973, destroyed." "Spare me the excuses, Counselor." Walsh's voice was ice. "What we have here is clear. Your client is wearing medals he did not earn. He is committing federal stolen valor, and he did so in my courtroom to garner sympathy for a criminal trespassing charge." She leaned forward, her face a mask of righteous anger. "Mr. Foster, you disgrace every man and woman who truly served. You mock their sacrifice. You are a fraud and a coward." The words hung in the air like poison. "I am finding you guilty on the trespassing charge and sentencing you to 6 months in county jail. Furthermore, I am holding you in contempt of court and recommending that the U.S. attorney pursue federal stolen valor charges against you." She raised her gavel. "Perhaps 6 months will teach you that honor cannot be purchased at a surplus store." The courtroom doors exploded open. The sound came first, the precise, synchronized march of military boots on marble. Then came the sight. 8 Marines in dress blue uniforms marched into the courtroom in perfect formation. Their white gloves, their gold buttons, their ceremonial swords, every detail was parade ground perfect. They moved with such precision, such authority, that everyone in the room froze. Behind them strode a man in a dark suit, Secretary of the Navy, James Caldwell, and beside him a Marine 2-star general whose chest was heavy with ribbons. They didn't pause at the gallery. They marched straight down the center aisle with military precision and undeniable purpose. "What is the meaning of this?" Judge Walsh sputtered, standing. "I am conducting a legal proceeding. You cannot just..." Secretary Caldwell raised one hand. The gesture was small but carried such authority that the judge's words died in her throat. He walked directly to Ray Foster. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Then, in full view of everyone present, the Secretary of the Navy came to attention and saluted. The Marine general beside him did the same. The 8 Marines behind them snapped to attention as one, and rendered the sharpest, most precise salutes of their careers. "Sergeant Foster." Caldwell's voice filled the courtroom with command and respect. "Jim Caldwell, sir. It's been too long." Ray slowly returned the salute. His weathered hand rose with the muscle memory of 50 years, steady despite his age. When he lowered it, there was a faint smile on his lips, sad, knowing. "Hello, Jim." Caldwell held his gaze for a moment, then turned to face Judge Walsh. His expression transformed from warmth to cold fury. "Your Honor," he said, his voice formal and cutting, "you have just called one of this nation's greatest living heroes a fraud and a coward." He walked to the bench and retrieved Ray's medals from where they lay discarded. He held them with a reverence that was itself a rebuke. "Allow me to educate you about the man you just sentenced to jail." The Marine general stepped forward. His name tag read Matson. He opened a leather folder and began to read in a voice trained to carry across parade grounds. "Staff Sergeant Raymond Foster, United States Marine Corps, enlisted January 1966. Deployed to the Republic of Vietnam, 3rd Marine Division, February 9. He looked up. His public records are indeed limited. That's because Sergeant Foster's complete service file is classified at the highest level. Judge Walsh's face had gone from smug to confused to pale. On February 12, 1960, under continuous enemy fire, he made 6 trips across open ground to evacuate wounded Marines and Navy corpsmen from an exposed position. Caldwell held up the Distinguished Service Cross. This medal was awarded for extraordinary heroism. The citation reads that Sergeant Foster, despite being wounded twice, refused evacuation and continued to rescue his fellow Marines until all 17 wounded men were secured. He turned the medal so the light caught it. 3 Navy corpsmen, 14 Marines, 17 men who went home to their families because Ray Foster decided that we can't help them, wasn't an acceptable answer. The Secretary's voice grew harder. The records are sealed because Sergeant Foster's actions were later cited in classified after-action reports used to develop Marine Corps urban combat doctrine. His heroism didn't just save lives that day, it has saved lives for 50 years since. He looked directly at Walsh. This man is not a fraud. This man is a living legend in the Marine Corps. Every officer who commands Marines today studies what he did in Huế, and you just called him a coward. Judge Walsh had gone completely white. She gripped the edge of her bench as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. She stammered. I didn't. How was I supposed to know? You could have shown basic respect to an 81-year-old veteran instead of assuming he was a criminal. Caldwell said quietly. The quiet was somehow more devastating than shouting. You could have verified facts before rendering judgment. You could have treated him with the dignity he earned. He turned back to Ray. Sergeant Foster, on behalf of the United States Navy and Marine Corps, I apologize for what you endured here today. Ray placed a gentle hand on Caldwell's shoulder. The gesture was both a comfort and a command. Some things, it said, don't require an apology. It's all right, Jim, Ray said softly. She didn't know. How could she? He turned to Judge Walsh. For the first time since entering her courtroom, he spoke to her directly, and his voice held no anger. Your Honor, these medals aren't for me. I don't wear them to avoid parking tickets or to get special treatment. He paused, his pale green eyes distant. I wear them so I remember. I wear them for the boys who didn't make it home, for Danny Ortiz and Mike Riley and Tommy Chen, for all the faces I still see. His voice grew softer. That old facility I was trying to visit. There's a memorial plaque on the east wall. It lists the names of 17 Marines and sailors from my platoon who died in Vietnam. The base was decommissioned 20 years ago, but that plaque is still there. I go every year on the anniversary. I couldn't get there during the day because of the construction, so I went at night. I shouldn't have cut the fence. That was wrong, but I needed to be there. I needed to remember them. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Several people in the gallery were wiping their eyes. These pieces of metal, Ray touched the Distinguished Service Cross in Caldwell's hand. They're not mine. They belong to those 17 boys. I'm just the one who gets to carry them. His words settled over the room like a benediction. He wasn't defending himself. He wasn't seeking vindication. He was speaking for men who could no longer speak for themselves. Judge Walsh was crying now, silent tears running down her face. Mr. Foster, I am so deeply sorry. I have no excuse for my behavior. I was wrong, completely, utterly wrong. She looked at the nearly empty courtroom, at the Marines standing at attention, at the medals in the secretary's hands. Case dismissed, all charges dropped, and her voice broke. My deepest, most sincere apology. She removed her glasses, wiping her eye. Bailiff, please note for the record that I am formally requesting an investigation into my own conduct here today. This should never have happened. Caldwell nodded respectfully. The Department of the Navy will be submitting a formal complaint to the State Judicial Review Board. I understand, Walsh said quietly. I deserve whatever consequences come. General Matson stepped forward. Sergeant Foster, we would be honored to escort you from this courtroom. Ray looked at the 8 Marines in their dress blues, at his old friend Jim Caldwell, who'd risen from frightened lieutenant to Secretary of the Navy, at all the ceremony and respect. I'd like that, he said simply. The procession that left courtroom 3A was something the city courthouse had never seen. The 8 Marines formed an honor guard around Ray Foster. Secretary Caldwell walked beside him, with General Matson on his other side. David Park followed behind, still trying to process what had just happened. As they moved through the courthouse corridors, word spread like wildfire. Clerks emerged from offices. Attorneys paused mid-conversation. Other judges stepped out of their courtrooms. Someone started clapping, then another. Within moments, the hallway erupted in applause. Court officers stood at attention. Veterans in the courthouse for other matters saluted. Regular citizens simply stood and clapped, many with tears in their eyes. Ray kept his eyes forward, his back straight despite his age, but his hands trembled slightly. This kind of attention was harder to accept than Walsh's accusations had been. They emerged into bright sunlight. A crowd had gathered on the courthouse steps. The news had already spread through social media, texts, the mysterious network of instant communication. A local TV crew was setting up. The reporter, a young woman named Maria Santos, approached with a microphone. Secretary Caldwell, can we get a statement? Mr. Foster's privacy will be respected, Caldwell said firmly. But I will say this. What happened in that courtroom today was a grave injustice that should never occur to any veteran. We will be working with state authorities to ensure it doesn't happen again. He turned to Ray. Sergeant, my car is waiting. May we give you a ride home? Ray shook his head gently. Thank you, Jim, but I'd like to walk a bit. Clear my head. Caldwell understood. Of course, but Ray, he held out the medals. Don't forget these. Ray took them, pinning them back to his windbreaker with careful precision. Each ribbon, each medal returned to its proper place. David Parks stepped forward hesitantly. Mr. Foster, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry I couldn't do more. Ray smiled at the young attorney. You did everything that mattered. You believed me. You made the call. That took courage. I just dialed a phone number. You trusted your gut when the evidence said otherwise. Ray replied, that's the hardest thing to do. You'll make a fine lawyer. One of the Marines, a young sergeant with the name Chen on his uniform, approached. Sir, my grandfather was Tommy Chen. He served with you in Huế. Ray's eyes widened. Little Tommy's grandson? Yes, sir. He died before I was born. But my grandmother told me about you. She said you carried him out of the fire. He lived for 3 more days because of you. Long enough to write her a last letter. The young Marine's voice shook. She still has that letter. She said every day she got with him after that was because of you. Ray gripped the young man's shoulder, unable to speak. That evening, as the sun began to set, a convoy of vehicles pulled up to the old harbor naval facility. Secretary Caldwell had arranged it personally. The locked gate was officially opened. Marine guards stood at attention, and Ray Foster, accompanied by Caldwell, General Matson and a small honor guard, walked through the grounds he'd tried to reach by cutting a fence. The facility was overgrown, abandoned for 2 decades, but they found the east wall easily, and there, weathered but still legible, was a bronze plaque, in memory of those who gave all 3rd Marine Division, Huế City, 1960. Secretary Caldwell and General Matson stood respectfully silent. I tried to get here during the day, Ray said quietly, but there's construction. They said the whole facility is being demolished next month. The memorial too. His voice cracked slightly. This was my last chance to see. Caldwell stepped forward. Ray, I didn't know this was here. I'll see to it that the plaque is removed before demolition and reinstalled at the Marine Corps War Memorial. These names won't be forgotten. Thank you, Jim. They stood in silence as the sun set, casting long shadows across the memorial wall. Ray's lips moved slightly, as if speaking to each name. Finally, he saluted. The Marines behind him saluted as one. The honor they showed wasn't to Ray. It was to the names on that wall. After a long moment, Ray lowered his hand. I can go now. As they walked back to the vehicles, General Matson spoke. Sergeant Foster, the Marine Corps would like to invite you to speak at Officer Candidate School. Young Marines need to hear from men like you. I'm not much of a speaker. You spoke in that courtroom today, Matson said. That's exactly what they need to hear. Not war stories, but what service really means, what it costs, what we carry. Ray was quiet for a moment. All right, but only if I can talk about them. He gestured back toward the memorial. They're the ones who paid the price. That's precisely why you should come, sir. They drove Ray home, a small neat house in a quiet neighborhood. Before he got out, Caldwell handed him an envelope. My private number, the secretary said. You call if you need anything. Day or night, no more cutting fences. Understood? Ray smiled. Understood. And Ray, I'm proud to have served with you. Then and now. You were a good lieutenant, Jim. You're a better secretary. As Ray walked to his door, the Marines came to attention one last time, not because protocol demanded it, but because some men earn that respect simply by being who they are. The story hit the news that evening. By morning it was national. Judge accuses Medal of Honor recipient of stolen valor. Read one headline. Ray had tried to correct them. It was a Distinguished Service Cross, not Medal of Honor, but the media ran with the more dramatic version. The video, taken by someone in the courtroom on their phone, went viral. Judge Walsh's words, "You are a fraud and a coward," played on a loop, contrasted with the image of 8 Marines saluting an elderly man in a windbreaker. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The State Judicial Review Board launched a formal investigation within. The transcript of the hearing was reviewed. Witnesses were interviewed. The evidence was damning. Judge Katherine Walsh was suspended pending the investigation. 2 weeks later, facing censure and possible disbarment, she submitted her resignation from the bench. Her statement was brief. I failed in my duty to administer justice fairly and respectfully. I allowed prejudice and assumption to override fact and basic human decency. I deeply regret my actions and accept full responsibility for them. I am resigning effective immediately. But that wasn't the end of it. The state legislature, prompted by the incident, passed the Veterans Treatment Act, requiring all court personnel to complete training on how to properly interact with veterans, understand military records, and recognize legitimate service documentation. The Marine Corps announced that the memorial plaque from Old Harbor would be reinstalled at a place of honor at the National Museum of the Marine Corps, where it would be preserved permanently. And Ray Foster, who'd only wanted to visit a memorial in peace, found himself thrust into the spotlight he'd never sought. 3 weeks after the courthouse incident, Judge Walsh did something unexpected. She showed up at Ray's house. Ray answered the door on a Saturday morning to find Katherine Walsh standing on his porch. She was dressed in civilian clothes, jeans, a simple blouse, looking diminished without her robes and bench. "Mr. Foster," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "I know I have no right to be here, but I needed to apologize to you in person, without the courtroom, without the uniform, just as one human being to another." Ray studied her for a moment, then stepped aside. "Come in." They sat in his small living room. The walls were covered with photographs, fellow Marines, some in black and white, some faded color photos from a different era. On one shelf sat his medals in a simple display case. "I've spent the last 3 weeks trying to understand how I became that person," Walsh said quietly. "The person who could be so cruel, so arrogant. I told myself I was fighting stolen valor, protecting real veterans. But the truth is, I was just cruel." She looked at him directly. "There's no excuse for what I said to you. None. And I'm not here asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I understand the gravity of what I did." Ray was silent for a long moment. "Can I tell you something, Miss Walsh? Please. When you called me a coward, it didn't hurt because it was you saying it. It hurt because somewhere, in the back of my mind, I've always wondered if it was true." Walsh's eyes widened. "But you saved 17 men. I left 30 others behind," Ray said softly. "We lost 17 men from my platoon over the course of that year. I survived. They did. I've worn these medals for 50 years, and every time I put them on, I wonder if I deserve them." His voice was steady but his eyes glistened. "So when you said I was a fraud, part of me thought, maybe she sees what I've always feared, that I'm not a hero. I'm just the one who happened to make it home, Mr. Foster." But then Jim Caldwell showed up. Ray continued. "And those Marines saluted. Not me. They saluted what these medals represent. The sacrifice, the service, the 17 men on that wall." He looked at Walsh. "You were wrong about the facts, but you taught me something important. These medals aren't about whether I deserve them. They're about remembering men who can't speak for themselves." Walsh was crying quietly. "How can you be so gracious?" "Because I spent too many years carrying anger and guilt," Ray said simply. "It's heavy. I don't want to carry yours too." He stood and walked to his kitchen. "I was about to make coffee. Would you like some?" Walsh wiped her eyes, stunned by the simple offer of kindness. Yes, thank you." They sat at his small kitchen table and talked for 2 hours. About service, about judgment, about the weight we all carry. When Walsh finally left, she paused at the door. "Mr. Foster, what you did today, showing me grace I don't deserve, that took more courage than anything in any battle." Ray shook his head gently. "It just took being tired of anger." After she left, Ray walked back to his living room. He stood before the photographs on his wall. Young faces in old pictures. Danny Ortiz, grinning despite the heat. Mike Riley, trying to look tough. Tommy Chen, barely 18. He touched each photo gently. "I remembered you," he whispered, "just like I promised." Outside, the sun was setting. Another day, another year. Ray Foster, who'd never wanted to be a hero, sat in his chair and closed his eyes. In his dreams, he was young again, in Huế City, making those impossible crossings through enemy fire. But in his dreams, this time, everyone made it home.